Good evening, good evening, good evening. Let me welcome you to this evening's edition of Mango Tree Dialogues. And thank you for joining me under the mango tree. We have a number of things that we want to get through this evening. And I would just like to, first of all, really thank you for taking the time out to join me. And of course, if you're not listening to this live, it will be up on the channel, the discussions, and you can turn there at your own leisure. All right, there's a breaking news item that I would like to mention first. Of course, this evening we're talking about Jamaica and the Jamaican diaspora. And this evening I would like to just mention this breaking news that came just this evening, that we now have a new ambassador to the United States, Major Anthony Anderson, who is a retired commissioner of police. He has replaced Mrs. Audrey Marks, who has had 2 stints at the ambassadorship, and she has been appointed as a senator. So she's jumping into the political fray, and we will see how that goes. Her tenure as the ambassador in Washington, has been, I'm not going to say it has been stellar or remarkable, but she has held her own there, and she has done her best in communicating with the Jamaican diaspora. Perhaps I would think more could have been done, of course, but in terms of intersecting with the various groups, but the Jamaican diaspora in the United States is a very big one, and there are so many disparate groupings even within that. So, but she did her best. Let me just put it that way. And I know that she's aspiring to political things. We will see what comes of that. All right, for this evening, there are, well, basically 3 things that are occupying my mind. And the first that is I want to talk to you about is the whole matter of the budget 2025 that is now in vogue. Started last Tuesday with the presentation of the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Favour Williams, and continued today by Dr. Julian Robinson, who is the opposition, the spokesman on finance. I'll have a few more things to say about that. And then after that, most importantly, will be an interview, a discussion that I will have with not a stranger to Mango Tree Dialogues. She has been here before, and I look forward to having her here again with me, Dr. Rosalea Hamilton. And we want to have probably a quick look at the budget. I know that she has a very deep interest in the MSME, that's the medium and small business sector. And I would like to really hear her views on, was there anything in the 2 presentations for that group? So we might not have mentioned it before, but I know she's listening, and so she can prepare herself to probably say a few words about that. But the more important thing that we wanted to have a look at is the continuing work of the Constitutional Reform Committee, what is being done, especially in this political year, and what might be its future. And her suggestions regarding the appointment to the Senate. And I'd be interested to hear what she has further to say about that. She wrote an article on it some time ago in the Daily Gleaner. And then finally, there is something that I'm watching. I won't tell you what that's going to be just now. Just stay with me towards the end of the program. Because it's a development that I think is going to have some real far-reaching implications for us in the Caribbean. And so we will I'll leave it at that and I'll come back to it. All right. So with regard to the budget, you know, as I said, they have been doing that. The minister, sorry about that. The Minister of Finance, Mrs. Favor Williams, kicked off the budget presentation, and what she had to say was very instructive. I think it was her maiden presentation, and I must congratulate her as the first female Minister of Finance in Jamaica, which is a signal honor as far as I'm concerned. And she replaced, of course, as you know, Dr. Nigel Clark, who has gone on to be one of the deputy managing directors of the IMF. And so a lot of people were looking out to see how she was going to make her presentation and what this would be like. And I believe that on a whole, she did a very good job. On a whole, she held her own and was able to make a presentation, which I believe on the merit of it was fairly commendable in terms of the different subject areas. You know, in a budget, there are so many things to address, and you never can get to every single aspect of it. But I think that on a whole, she was able to do a very good job in presenting a number of the things that the government wants to do, has been doing, and intends to do. But behind, in the backdrop of the entire presentation, as you could expect, was the looming general election that is coming by September. There are rumors that it can be in July, that the Prime Minister certainly will not go down to the wire, and they usually don't. So people expect that by July, certainly not beyond August, we should be having the general elections. And so behind all the presentations, you could hear it this evening with Julian and Dr. Julian Robinson as he made the opposition response. And certainly it was in her response. You know, there are a lot of things that are being promised that both sides are going to do. And so it will be very interesting to see, how the voters themselves will be impacted by what they heard. Because I must say, friends, and I remind the voters that they are the employers of these politicians who present themselves for public office. And that is not something to be taken lightly. It is something that they have to really weigh very carefully. These politicians come and they posture themselves and make all kinds of promise to people, almost tantamount to creating a new heaven and a new earth. And at the end of the day, they ride the people to their destinations that they want to go, and then just let them go and find grass on their own. So I want to remind people that you are the employers, and they are coming to you as potential employees, even if they have been there before. They are still your employees, and they're coming to you to continue in the job. And so you have to listen very carefully. And I think that by and large, the Jamaican population, by dint of necessity, by dint of the difficulties that we have faced down through the years, especially those, older than 50, let's say, who have seen and borne the burden and the heat of the day in so many ways, that they have become more smart. They have become more wise, I think, in wanting the kind of politician that can really look after their concerns. As a matter of fact, the big concern, and I think the politics, I would say, has moved into a kind of transactional frame of mind. Politics has always been transactional. I mean, you come to me, you want to get my vote, then you're gonna do certain things for me, and then I will give you my vote or I will support you. So it's a transaction between the politician and the potential voter. I mean, that's what it is, and we can't escape that. But the politics has become increasingly so, especially with the young people. And the young people are very demanding. I would say a good 60% of the population of young people, who have been born into the internet era and have developed a sense of independence that has put them in a way more enlightened in terms of what things are and what demands they can make. They have become even more so than the older people, like say 60, going over 60 and so on. I might be wrong in that analysis, but I think I'm onto something there. That this transactional motif is becoming more and more a settled matter in the Jamaican political landscape. So when they come with these budget presentations, you have to listen very carefully and try to find out what if anything at all, they say to you that can really cause you to be on their side. And so we will see how that goes, and whether or not both sides can deliver the goodies that they are claiming that they are capable of producing. So we'll see what happens. But both presentations, I think, I would say they were pretty commendable. Julian Robinson this afternoon was a very measured, Julian has always been a very measured person, and so has been, Favour Williams. There are many people who thought that she did not present a kind of flamboyant sense of her predecessor, Nigel, Dr. Clark. But, people come in all kinds of different, personalities and modes of doing things and presenting things. And I don't think that most people were put off by that. And yet, I think that she rose to the occasion. I think she might have surprised a lot of people by what she was able to present, and the kind of demeanor and the manner. You could see something of the politician in her as she made her presentation. As to the substance, that is something that we can debate at another time. I don't want to really get into the substance, at this point, because it is going to detain us quite a bit. But on the basis of what was said, I think we have enough to chew on to be able to judge her, and certainly to judge Dr. Robinson as to, the strength, not just the strength of their presentation, but how much that can be helpful to us, as a people going forward in an election year. It is a very, very critical time. People thought that, in the presentations, and we're going to hear from the next Tuesday from the leader of the opposition, and then next Thursday you'll hear from the Prime Minister himself. And there are many people who are, of course, of the view that they will be pandering to the public, and you have to listen very carefully and to be able to distill precisely, what they're saying, and so that you can be more informed, more enlightened, and hopefully that when the time comes, that you can make the right decision. All right. All right. I see that my guest is sitting in the green room under the mango tree. So I'll just admit her now, and we can get on with the discussion.
Hi,
There you are. Good evening, Doc.
how are you?
I'm doing very well. And yourself?
I'm doing well, doing well. Doing too much, but
Okay. Thanks for joining me this evening.
can you hear me
On
well? Can you
hearing
hear
you
me well?
a little muffled.
Is this better?
Yes.
Better.
Yeah, that's better.
All right. Yeah.
As we talk some more, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Right, but welcome again. And the I don't know if you heard what I said earlier on the budget.
No.
All right, I was just commenting that I know that you have an interest in the MSME sector.
Yes.
I was talking about the general budget presentations by Minister Faval Williams, and the response this evening by Dr. Julian Robinson,
Mhm.
and the different postures that they assumed. I didn't get too much into the details, as that would have detained us. But I had mentioned that I know that you have an interest in the MSME sector, and just wanted to find out from you if there is any comment or anything in the budget that might have caught your interest, and that you think was helpful or can be helpful to the MSME sector. But before you do that, let me just introduce you. I know you're no stranger to the program, but Dr. Rosalea Hamilton is the founding director of the Institute of Law and Economics, and she has a very strong interest in writing, of course. She writes for the Gleaner newspaper from time to time, and she is an advocate for the micro economic sector, and she represents her voice very powerfully at different times in this regard. All right. So now, tell me about the MSME, and whether you saw any goodies there for that sector.
Well, I think one can always find goodies, and they're just
Yes.
that, just goodies. The question is sometimes goodies are not necessary. Goodies may not help you to grow, get strong, and be the driver of our economy. And I
Mhm.
think in a sense, when we talk about small businesses, we have to be thinking about a process of growth and competitiveness. Fundamentally,
Yes.
that's other than that, you're just talking about keeping businesses alive because it's important that people have a way to earn a legitimate standard of living and earn money, right?
Yes.
To the extent that we're talking about a problem of growth and development in our country, we've seen anemic growth for far too long. Then I
Yes.
think
Yes.
the measures that are out there, providing more funding for the MSMEs, that's been around for decades. We've been talking about making more funding accessible, easy access, and so on. All of that is not transformative in and of itself, right? You need the institutions to support these businesses, to
Right.
foster innovation and technological development. You need to lift the capacity of these businesses to be globally competitive, to be productive, and so on. So it requires much more than these goodie bags that we get
Yes.
every budget year, right? Yeah, for some businesses it's important and they'll benefit and it will help, but in my mind it's not transformative. And we know that because we've been there before. We've been provided these kinds of nuggets to these businesses from time to time, budget to budget, but we're not seeing live in over the past many years the transformation of these businesses to globally
Right.
competitive. We know that many of these businesses have to go overseas, and we see the dynamism in the diaspora market, right?
Oh,
Our
yes, yes.
doing amazing things in the diaspora. And so we have to ask ourselves, can they stay here and do it? And that takes us into the discussion I know you want to have with me today about the institutions of government, right? Are they adequate? Do we need to transform them? And the voice that I've been bringing to the constitutional discussions is that the most fundamental thing we have to do is to transform the structure of government, and that includes the Senate.
Exactly. And we're going to get to that very quickly. But one of the big problems that I heard and criticisms that a prominent member of the MSME sector, a female, I don't recall her name just now, made of the presentation is that there was not much in there for them, especially with regard to the access to capital. And she was really concerned about that particular thing. And it seems to be, I've listened to other spokespersons, and that is the bugbear for a lot of them. What do they present as collaterals? How do they compete with the bigger users of capital? And to the extent to which they feel that they're excluded because they don't have all these kinds of collateralized responses that are necessary.
Therein
Access
lies
to
the issue.
capital.
Absolutely. Therein lies the issue of the institutional supports. But this issue of the lack of access to capital, the adequacy of capital in terms of the amounts that they can access and so on, is not a new problem. We've been talking
Yes,
about
I
it for the
have.
last 20 years. And so this is what I'm saying. Every now and then you hear there's more and there's some new initiative to create access, but they've
Yeah.
not fundamentally changed these structural problems that these MSMEs face. And she's absolutely right.
Oh,
Access
yes.
to, for example, collateral in the form of land is not a new problem. We know
Right.
that so 25% of our people are living in what is called squatter communities. And every year, I mean, every budget and every so often, every new administration, you hear about efforts to put titles in people's hands. And while some people have gotten titles, the problem persists. That's vast tracts of land is not only being squatted, but it's in the hands of government and essentially underdeveloped. And so we have to
Right.
look again at not just land, but other forms of assets that we can make available and accessible to small businesses so that they can build their businesses with an asset base that gives them a fighting chance.
All right. So it's basically an institutional problem. So let's get to this institution of the Senate.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, you wrote an article sometimes ago in the Gleaner regarding that, and I found the article very, very interesting from many levels, and especially I think you advocated for the senators to be elected
Yes.
directly from the people, and I found that too. That certainly corroborates, with my own thinking. I don't think that people should be representing anybody in any part of any parliament if you have not got the mandate of the people to do so. And it cannot be on the appointment by any prime minister or president. You come straight to us. Like I said earlier in my preamble, I said your voters need to really understand that they are the employers of these people. They are
Absolutely.
employees if they're in the job, and if they're wanting to be in the job, they're potential employees, and that they have to come to us, present themselves, and then we make a decision as to whether we want to hire them. So
Absolutely.
give us the contours of your thought with regard to the Senate, anything having to do with constitutional reform, especially in this election year, and what might not happen if this government should not get back, for example. Yeah, anything that is on your mind with regard to constitutional reform, but especially we'll want to zero in on this Senate at some point.
So for me, the big picture is what the bill presents, and it's in that context I was discussing the elected Senate, because the context of the bill is that it sought to Jamaicanize the Constitution, of course, remove the king as head of state, and
Right.
positive types of changes that we need. We want a constitution that represents us, and we want to formalize some of our symbols and so on. So we can debate whether that's adequate, but it's there, and we can say kudos to the government for bringing us this far in an important conversation that we've actually had in this country since independence. So kudos. I think it's an important step. But there's a statement in the bill that I think I've written about beyond this article on the Senate. I've written in other articles that the bill retains and expands this appointed Senate as part of a broader legislative objective to retain the parliamentary cabinet system of government. Now, on the face of it, we think about it as, well, a parliamentary system versus a Republican system, say, right? Or any other form of system of government. But our system of government is not like your typical parliamentary system. We have, out of the colonial era, inherited and crafted, let me say, because it was a very deliberate decision in 1962, crafted a constitution in which we embedded and consciously designed a very authoritarian structure of government. A government in which the head of state, the prime minister, the head of government, I should say, has all the power really that is embedded in the power of the cabinet by virtue of Section 69, subsection 2, where cabinet has the power to control government and ultimately is supposed to be accountable to Parliament. But what we see and what we've seen over the years since independence is the dominance of the executive in the legislature. And so we find that our government, our parliament, let me be specific, our cabinet makes the law as is consistent with the Constitution, the policy and so on that they will execute. And then they go to Parliament effectively and make the law.
Oh, yes.
So there's no oversight and checks with respect to the adequacy of the law, whether mechanisms to get our voices in the shaping of the law, that takes place. Cabinet gets its way. And so we have this arrangement which perpetuates a kind of top-down approach to governance. Nothing changes significantly in our country unless our prime minister approves it. And it's approved by cabinet, it goes to Parliament, it gets the legislative process, simply rubber stamps it. And so what you have then is a parliamentary system of both the lower and the upper house, controlled by the winning party and controlled by the cabinet and the prime minister.
Exactly.
So I suggest that this is not only undemocratic, because the senators are appointed, but importantly, it perpetuates this dominance of the executive, right? Because the Senate simply rubber stamps what the executive says. Now, recently, you may recall that we have now created a 15th parish, right?
Yes. Mhm.
And
Portmore.
so what we saw was a process that apparently bypassed the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, which is set up with a
Exactly.
mandate to ensure to tackle all of the constitutional changes. Now we have a process of constitutional change ongoing, yet we change the constitution. Right. We take on this kind of new kind of arrangement, right? Outside of this discussion of constitution. So I found it very curious every time we make these changes that have constitutional implications. We do it outside of this broader conversation that we, the people, ought to be a part
Mhm.
of. So that
Exactly.
we, the people, have not really been engaged with respect to this issue. There's been meetings in the parish, but this doesn't affect only the people in Portmore. It affects all of us. It's our country, and we're reshaping the parishes and the boundary in our country. And so that took place. And again, we saw what we typically see, the rubber stamping
Oh,
of
yes.
the bill by the Senate. And so we have again no opportunity for a Senate to really deliberate on a piece of
Right.
legislation, and importantly, create mechanisms for our voices. And so, for example, to the extent that we have adequate oversight committees where these pieces of legislation can come to these oversight committees with, if it's economic or whatever it is,
Sure.
scrutinize carefully, create mechanisms where our voices can be heard. We can petition the parliament, petition the senators as well as the members of the House with respect to our views on these pieces of legislation. So none of that is possible under the current arrangement. And I'm suggesting
That's
that
right.
if we have an elected Senate, we have opportunities to do this.
Right. And what I find very interesting is that, and at the same time, really sad, is that the report that was made to Parliament from the Constitutional Reform Committee hasn't indicated anything that will do away with any of the present arrangement that we have. So that rubber stamping is entrenched. And what I think is important for people to realize and to bear in mind is that the politicians themselves are not the ones who are going to carry out any fundamental change to anything. It's going to be left, as you said, to we the people. And that is where my real concern is, to what extent are Jamaicans conscientized? Because if you just take a summary walk and just canvass some Jamaicans and say, what do you know about constitutional reform? What? It's a, most people don't have a clue that the
Yes,
process is even taking place.
right.
And, and,
You
and,
know,
and so how do we get the word out to people to help them to say what you just said a while ago so eloquently, for them to get around it and to say, hey, boy, I understand this. And it's true, true, they need to be elected. True, the prime minister behave like, say, my God, that sort of thing. How do we demythologize,
well,
all of
we
this?
start by doing exactly what your girl has done, you know.
Right.
Right here, we start through conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So I hear exactly what you hear as I walk up and down Jamaica. When I go to the
Oh, yes.
supermarket, I go to my hairdresser, I engage people. What do you know
Mm-hmm.
about the Constitution? What do you want to know?
Mm-hmm.
And so on. And yes, we have to do much more, but I take the view that this is not the responsibility of government alone.
No.
If we view Jamaica as our country, that we are the owners, we
Yes.
also have a responsibility as owners to discuss, describe, analyze, criticize, and put forward real solutions to fix our country. And so this matter of education
Mm-hmm.
and dialogue and debate and engagement is our responsibility as well. And that's why I said it starts with what you're doing, because you are taking on that responsibility to use the frameworks you have, the opportunities you have, to engage this conversation. And I think if
Right.
more of us do that, we will go
Mhm.
a long way. And so
And
and I want to make a last point there that
sure.
I am wary of the idea that there are a set of experts that have all the answers, and
Mhm.
somehow, we must talk to the people and educate the people, right? I actually take the view that many of us experts, so-called experts, have to
Mhm.
listen to the people and
Yeah.
try to understand what people want to
Mhm.
develop and shape their society. And we can use the science we have, the experience we have, the intellect we have, whatever, to make sense and to interpret it in a way that can
Exactly.
actually turn up in a constitution, because it is
Which is
fundamentally a legal document.
exactly, which is certainly not what is happening from the CRC. And the we have to break it down in that granular level, and like you said, engage people right where they are. And so
Yes.
you have to have a kind of parallel force
Mhm.
to the government itself, that can go there, of civil society, like yourself, myself, others, who can engage people right where they are, the food vendor sitting down there, and they just talk to them, because they're ready for conversation. People are, like you said, in the hairstylist salons, people are ready for conversations.
Absolutely.
And unless they grasp it, there's a deficit of communication. And like you said, people think that you can just be an elite and just tell people and they accept it because it's coming from top down. It doesn't work.
Absolutely not. And I can tell you,
You
as someone who's actively engaged in the process, I have been learning from the Jamaican people.
better
I've
believe it,
heard
yes.
perspectives. Yes, I've heard people talk about what they're trying to do in their community and the kind of arrangement they'd like to see. And so I think we have to see this as a public engagement in which learning is continuous and is taking place through the dialogue. And none of us have all the answers. We have to work it out together.
Right. And I don't know how much time you have left with me. I suspected that you might have.
Yeah, not that much, yes.
All right, so let me just probably bring it off, round it off a little then. And just to ask, how can we as civil society come up with something programmatic to engage what we're talking about here? Because I think that's where it's at. We,
Yes,
the disinterested, we don't have no we have no aspirations in political power. We don't owe politicians nothing. We are
yes,
just Jamaicans wanting to see a better way of governance for
yes,
Jamaica. And we
yes.
will never have a better chance than know that the process is being engaged to get out there and help
Absolutely.
people, you
Absolutely.
know.
Absolutely.
But we need to have some kind of organization in which we can really get that done, or we could be whistling past the cemetery.
Yes, well, let me make this point this way. So we're in the throes of, you know, engaging civil society organizations and
Mhm.
individuals. I am part of the Advocates Network, and this is what we have been doing since before, I should say, the establishment of the CRC. In fact, we were actively advocating for the establishment of such a CRC, which took place about
Mhm.
a year and a half after the original announcement that it would take place. So we've been engaging actively. But I want to say this, especially now to Jamaicans listening. We are in the throes of a general election, and unfortunately, too much of our history, we've engaged this process in a very divisive way. Now, by definition, party politics is about, you know, um, you know, supporting a team. I want to put it
Mhm.
that way, right?
Yeah.
And we know what it is to support a team, right? We get all
Oh, yes.
excited. And we do
That
it in
we
sports.
know.
Yeah, man, we do it in sports all the time. and the members of our family, right? We back different teams and so on. But when the match is over, we're one family,
Oh,
right?
yes.
And
Yes.
so I say that to say that this matter of the Constitution in a context when the world is changing so rapidly and it's forcing us to contemplate our future in a different way. I think we can no
Yes.
longer
Yes.
make the assumptions that there are countries and people, for that matter, who really want to see us develop. Some people may have thought that way in the past, but I think it's becoming much clearer now that
Mm-hmm.
countries have vested interests. Countries are explicitly pursuing their national interests. And
Exactly.
therefore, it begs the question, what is our national interest? What
Mm-hmm.
is binding us together as a people? Is it the
Mm-hmm.
Vision 2030? Is that what we all buy into? What is that? And you're raising that question with respect to the Constitution. What is it that will bring us together in a core set of constitutional provisions that can, we can say, yes, this is the kind of constitution that we want. And there are many people who are out there. Let me not say many, there are a few individuals who are out there and they're working and they're thinking and they're putting ideas together. I want to say, and we as part of the Advocates Network are putting such a platform together. And we will
Okay.
be making a submission to the Joint Select Committee. And I want to encourage Jamaicans not to see it as any partisan position, because it's too easy to vilify civil society when you're trying to support any government in power, right?
Exactly.
Because every
Exactly.
government in power has a problem with civil society or the press, right? Because as long as you're not saying what the government is saying, that's a
Right.
problem. Right. I
Right.
want to urge us to think about the future of our country and recognize that the people in government, as well as many of us who are not in government, want one thing, and that is to have a better Jamaica. And, and,
Amen.
and
Amen.
so we will differ with respect to how we create a better Jamaica. And that's fine, because that's kind of like backing different teams, football teams, we're all trying to score
Sure.
goals, right? Um, and which team will score the most goals is the discussion at any match, right?
Sure. Sure.
Um, and
We want to
so I
score this
think
goal for Jamaica.
exactly. We want to score a goal for Jamaica. And it doesn't really matter which team gets us there, quite frankly, right?
No
But
problem.
we want, and we will differ in how we score those goals, because some of those goals can be deadly, right? Some of those, the way we score the goals could put us back for century, could block certain kinds of developments. And so we have to have a healthy debate and discussion.
Mm-hmm.
We have to agree to disagree. And we have to find a way to encourage our leaders to take our voices seriously, to listen to it,
Sure.
to find a way to incorporate these positions in the Constitution, because it cannot be just the voice of the government, the leading
The opposition.
parliamentarians, and the opposition. It cannot simply be the ruling party and the opposition. And so I think I want to appeal to both the ruling party and the opposition to listen carefully to the Jamaican people. We're not quite saying the same things. Although I want to quickly say there are some things we agree with. We certainly agree to move the king. We
Sure.
certainly
Sure.
agree that we want more accountability in government. We
Sure.
certainly agree we want a framework that will have less corruption and more integrity among our parliamentarians, etc. The
Sure.
problem is, how do we get it?
Sure. And that's why I find so disturbing the opposition supposed boycott of attending these meetings, because they have a pet agenda that they think should dominate with regard to the CCJ. But that's another matter.
Yeah,
You know.
exactly. And the question is, it would be more comfortable to know that the position that they're taking is a position that they have actively solicited from the population and say, hey, this is a view of the people. It's not just a
That's the point.
PNP view. It's not and in
That's the
fact,
point.
that particular position with respect to the court happens to be supported by a lot of Jamaicans. But if it was represented as this is the position of the people, that's a different framing
Yes.
of the issue, as opposed to this is a PNP, long-standing PNP position,
Right.
and therefore you must adopt it. And I think it misses the subtle point that this constitutional discussion is about the people.
Exactly. And especially when you know that there are really three options with the court, the final court. People want to remain in the Privy Council. Some want to bring it right home, like myself. And then there's the CCJ. You know, so it's not even a settled question that, boy, it has to be the CCJ. You know, and then you boycott the meetings because of that. Come on.
Yeah, and I think in that context, though, it sounds to me like we can settle the matter in a referendum.
Of course.
I mean, let's do it. And we don't need to detain the issue anymore. Put it to the people and let's see if the people want to move to a CCJ elsewhere. And on that note, I want to quickly say this. Again, to remind us of the context, one of the moments that I am very proud of with respect to our regional arrangement is what seems to be emerging now. A unified position with respect to our relationship with Cuba and the medical professionals that they have provided that have saved lives across our region.
And you're picking up on something that I'm gonna be saying after we
all right. Well, I want to make this point though. I want to make this point because in moments like this, we need a strong region to stand together. As opposed to us as individuals. And it's in that context I feel very strongly about a regional court. Because a regional court can't simply be seen as part of a judicial system. It is. But it is part of the institution we need to set up and strengthen if we want to survive in an increasingly regionalized world in which the geopolitics is changing. We're seeing a whole new BRICS developing. We see a G20 that's evolving. We've seen all these regional arrangements. And the only region who truly knows us and understands us is the Caribbean. And I suggest that it's a compelling and powerful reason for us to look again at strengthening our regional arrangement as part of the institutions we must create across the region to not only deepen our capacity to make our way in the world as Jamaicans, but also to shore up all of us within the region that we can survive and thrive.
I hear you, Doc. I hear you very loudly. It's a matter that we're gonna have to come back to at some point. But let me just close off with a statement that that Ronald Reagan once famously made, that it doesn't matter who gets the praise, so long as the work gets done.
Yeah.
And we want to get the work done. Whoever wants gets the praise, so long as we get what the people really want and need, then that's it.
Absolutely. Well, let me invite myself back to your program when we have the submission. I would love to engage you and the audience on this.
Just let me know anytime. You're welcome here.
Yes, we want to
read the mango tree anytime.
And
just tell me your favorite mango and I'll have it ready.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, you know, I love my Bombay and my Julie mango.
Okay. That's St. Vincent, eh?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So looking forward to continuing the conversation in the context of a document that we can share with you and your listeners, and hope that you can join us. We, again, don't expect everybody to agree with every single thing, but we want to encourage people, if you agree with some of it or most of it, to really support us in pushing for those kinds of changes.
All right. And thank you very much for joining me this evening.
All the very best. Good.
And take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right, friends. So that was Dr. Rosalea Hamilton. You know, very powerful appreciation of where we are and where we ought to be going with regard to the whole constitutional matter. And really appreciate her views this evening. There's one last thing that I will want to mention, and it is just something that I'm watching. Dr. Hamilton kind of made reference to it, and that is a Cuban doctor scenario and the kind of hard-fisted approach that the Trump administration is taking toward Caribbean countries with respect to their position, the administration's position on doctors that have been helping out in the Caribbean, healthcare workers really from Cuba. And the indication that they would move to revoke the visas of any heads of state and their families and so on, who countenance and who continue to hire these doctors. It's something that is emerging, but it is something that is very disturbing for the Caribbean peoples. And it's something that we're going to have to watch, because we know, especially here in Jamaica, how helpful, especially during the COVID era, the health personnel from Cuba have been, not just to Jamaica, but to the Caribbean and to the wider world, you know, where they have gone. I mean, if you talk about soft power, it is one of Cuba's greatest indications of soft power, the way in which they have been able to deploy health personnel across the world, in Africa, in the Caribbean, and other places, to help out in situations of sometimes, you know, in dire situations like in the COVID crisis. And also, something that Mango Tree Dialogues is watching, along almost the same vein, is the approach that the American government under Trump is taking with regard to the support that Caribbean countries are giving to China. It's becoming a big problem, and there are many Caribbean leaders who have begun to speak with this, and they have to speak with one voice, because again, we are finding ourselves being caught up in this kind of Cold War scenario, where the Trump administration is more or less laying down the gauntlet that you're either with us or with China. And if you're with China, then don't look for any help from me. And it is going to be a boondoggle. And how the Caribbean governments navigate this kind of maelstrom that is developing is something that we are watching. But we're going to say more about that, you know, in future episodes. But that will have to suffice for now. Now, it is just there for me to thank you for joining us this evening. A very, very interesting evening. And like I said, when you view the channel and view this episode, just you know, give a like for it. Sure, you'd like it. And send it off to, most importantly, share it with somebody else. Get the word out so that others can see what we're doing and, you know, become a part of the family. All right. So thank you very much again for joining me. And whatever you do, well, good night.